This is Inside the Game, where passion meets precision. Jonathan Turner, Nathan Wengler, and John Natale are your hosts, breaking down every goal, every controversy, every match that matters. From the heart of American soccer to the global stage. No fluff, just football. Weekdays at 9 a.m. live on YouTube, Roku TV, Facebook, Twitter, and all listening platforms.
Here are your hosts, Jonathan Turner, Nathan Wengler, and John Natale.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. It is Wednesday. It feels like it's Monday still. I don't know. This whole Memorial Day weekend thing is just kind of playing my mind here, guys, but it is a beautiful day here in Michigan. Nathan, you're in Michigan. John Natale, you're in Indiana, so it's great. And we've got a great guest on the West Coast here this morning. We'll get into that with Alexi Lalas here in about 10 minutes. It's Inside the Game. We're live right now on YouTube, Roku TV, Twitter, you name it. We're on a bunch of different platforms, and if you're not watching live, you can listen on all listening platforms here later this morning. And whenever you want to watch and listen, that's great. But either way, we are excited to have this show this morning. We're going to continue the conversation about the U.S. Open Cup and what's going on with that. We'll continue the conversation about the U.S. men's national team. But last night, we had 7 games that we were supposed to broadcast. Ended up only doing 5 of them. 2 teams, unfortunately, could not get us their feeds. So we'll continue to work through those kind of nuances to the process. But I get a text message. I leave the studio here 10 o'clock Eastern last night. I get home. My wife is in the kitchen. She's doing some cleaning up from dinner and whatnot from the kids and, whatever. And my phone starts to go off. It starts just, whatever. And sure as shit, there's someone going, with their phone, all getting all whatever, right? That little clicking sound that I do. They're rapidly texting, in Instagram land or whatever you want to call it, right? Social media land. And this person is pissed off about something, and they're accusing us of glorifying a team up in Michigan. And I'm sitting here going, I don't know what you're talking about. Who are we glorifying? And at first you're like, okay, so I don't necessarily look at all the stories that Dan Stickrat's writing. He's writing 60 stories a week, and I don't go through every single one of them going, what team is he writing about? I'm just like, okay, great. So I look through our website real quick and say, and there's no stories about this high school, other than rankings that aren't they're provided to us by the Michigan High School Soccer Coaches Association. So I respond back saying, I'm not sure what you're talking about. We aren't glorifying any teams. We just literally post these rankings. And she goes off, continues to go off. And I'm just like, okay, well, clearly you're disgruntled. Your team got beat last night. So, clearly. And just the way the conversation went. If the goal is to get a news organization like us to maybe look into a story, I don't know if attacking me on your intro is the right way to go about it. Right? If you want me to be on your side, if you want me to maybe consider writing or looking into it, I don't think attacking the place in which you're the attacking me is the right way to start. It might have been like, hey, did you hear this story? Do you think maybe you could look into this for us? But that's not how it went. So, you get what you give, or you give what you get, right? However you want to put that, right? So this is what happened last night. And of course, if there's a news story there, why wouldn't I want to look into that, right? Why wouldn't I want to give that some attention? And after we diffused the situation and got into it, I found out some things that were very interesting. And I did tell Dan last night at 11 o'clock, I go, Dan, look into this. If there's something here, then we should look into it, and we will look into it. Right. So, but I just say this, if you want the news to be on your side in a story, you shouldn't attack them along in the process of introducing to them to said story. That would be my advice to anyone out there. I don't know if you guys agree with me on that or not, but no, I feel like that's,
I do. Well, in group of high schoolers doing something stupid that results in the law getting involved is bad. I don't know if it necessarily grabs headlines. I'm sure that happens quite a bit. And I'm sure it happens quite a bit to the point to where certain people don't hear about it. And I'm sure there's certain media outlets that don't hear about it. I'm sure they would like to keep that stuff in-house. So I don't necessarily see that as being on our shoulders if we didn't know anything about it. And we're just simply putting them in the rankings because they were in the rankings and talking about them there. It's not like we did any feature stories. It's not like we're highlighting or spotlighting this team in particular. So that's where I come from. I mean, that's obviously not a good look for them, not a good look for the program, but that's not necessarily our issue. But that doesn't mean that we're not going to take the time to actually look into it and report on it, because we should in that situation.
What are your thoughts, John?
I don't know what nonsense is going up there in Michigan. I'm here in Indiana, so leave me out of it.
They don't do that stuff in Indiana, man.
Nope.
There's some
clean as a whistle. We've got everything smooth sailing here. Can't handle those shenanigans that are going up in the upper peninsula, or the so-called Pleasant Peninsula is what you're called.
Yep. No vices in Indy. They're straight down the middle.
Well, again, I mean, nonsense is nonsense. But I would imagine in every point of this country and in every corner, nook and cranny, there's probably something similar. Hey, at the end of the day, you think about it too from this perspective, is that I understand the emotional component of a mom or dad's relationship to their child, who is maybe their career is coming to an end. Right? You think about playoffs, right? When you start your season, we were all experienced this at some point in our careers as players. And when we talk with Alexi, I'm sure he'll have the exact same experience, right? Where, this game is your last game. It could be your last game. And what does that even mean? And the emotion that goes into that, right? And then there's a finality aspect of it. There's a grieving process with this. If you had a 4-year stint and you're not playing college soccer and your career ended last night, which for a lot across the state, a lot of teams had their seasons come to an end, and those seniors, their careers are over. There's a finality component to that. I understand that. I don't think anyone does and the complexity of that and how you deal with that. I don't think there's a high school player that would sit here today in their chairs 30 years, ago when they were in high school and say, I wish I could be back in that moment, that one game. I think we'd all go back to that one moment, that one game. So I don't discount that. I just think, again, there's a right way and a wrong way to go about it. I mean, if you want something from somebody, you don't want to go out and attack them. You to be fair, my dad says that the saying that you catch more bees with honey than with vinegar. Well, it's true, right? If you want me to do something for you, or you want me to listen to you, then you should come at it in a different way. And that, again, herein lies the problem with social media, with everything in this country, is that we are in this attack mode first and not into this, like, hey, how you doing? I'm so-and-so. How can I have something I want to tell you, I want to share with you? And that would have led this whole thing to a completely different, a situation where I'm not like in this disgruntled situation with some mom I've never met before in my entire life. Yeah, and that's why we keep talking about that on this show, is like, hey, moms and dads, when it comes to soccer, it comes to social media, like, dude, like, relax, like chill, which is hard to do. I get it. Anyways, we are going to get Alexi on here in just a moment. And before we do that, if you have a question for Alexi here this morning, get it in our chat. We'll try to get it in as often as we can, right? We want to make sure you are engaged and part of this process, as we do with every show. We love the comments. We love people who are tuning in here. So get those questions in. We will try and do that towards the end of the show. So if you have a question, we'll try to figure out which one we'll bring in, and we'll bring him in here in just a moment. But before we do that, anything new with either of you guys that you wanted to talk about here real quick before we jump into this?
I'm good.
No, I'm excited. I'm excited to chat with Alexi. I talked about, despite the fact that the last 2 years, and really have since coming into this company, I've been immersing myself into the soccer scene. I'll be the first to admit it. I'm not going to claim that I'm some sort of expert. I'm not going to claim that I know everything that there is to know. But over the last few years, I've really tried to kind of immerse myself in and embrace the soccer landscape, because I've been following the international team, pretty much my whole life, and the national team, that is, pretty much my whole life. And, I've always been excited to watch them play. And I know that, the last World Cup he was involved in was here in the United States. As the last time that we've hosted the World Cup. So I think he has a unique perspective on what it means to bring that tournament here to the U.S. and the kind of impact that can have on American soccer. And the truth is they made it to the round of 16 and they put up a fight. And the scary thing is when you look at the current crop of players, and especially even looking forward to Gold Cup, because I heard him talk a lot about that tournament as well, and Pulisic opting out, and what exactly the state of the union kind of is with this American team right now. It's scary. It's scary, especially after the last time we saw them play against Panama and Canada, and then going into that cup. Not only does it not seem like they're ready, I mean, it seems like we're kind of on the verge of we could be embarrassed, and that would be a really bad way to go when the World Cup is coming back to American soil for the first time in what is it? I mean, since 94, nearly 3 decades. So, or over 3 decades. So, yeah, I think it'll be really interesting to kind of hear what his state of the union is on American soccer right now.
Well, perfect. Without further ado, 1992, 1996 Olympian, and 1994 World Cup participant, Fox Sports analyst, State of the Union podcast host. I mean, you name it. He's got a resume longer than I can even say, but none other than Alexi Lalas from the great state of California and the great state of Michigan. And here he is, Mr. Alexi Lalas. Welcome to the show.
Gentlemen, good morning from California. Bright and early, up and at 'em. I'm ready to go. I had no idea I was going to jump right into a esoteric deep dive into the workings of soccer on and off the field and existential crises and all this kind of stuff. But I'm pleased to be here to hang out with you guys, and congratulations, by the way, on all your success and your progress and your growth relative to the company and spreading the gospel, if you will. It's fun to see. Not just Michigan, but the great state of Indiana and all that kind of stuff being involved in different ways, and that neck of the woods happening here. So I'm a proud Michigander, and I'm proud to see what you guys are doing.
Well, we appreciate the comments, and again, this is the third time I've had a chance to bring you in and be a part of the things that we're doing, and you've been a great friend to what we're doing, and we're very appreciative of that. And when we talk about U.S. men's soccer, we talk about the state of U.S. men's soccer. It's something that, for me, from my perspective, and I know we've talked about on the show quite a bit, and I'd love to hear your new thoughts on this, is that we are at this point in our growth as a soccer nation that we have talent. There's no doubt we have more talent today than we did yesterday, right? There's no question about that. The question now becomes, what do we do with that talent, and how do we do it in a system that makes sense for us to win soccer games on the international level? And something that we've been battling back and forth with our guests and with them on the show is about how to go about doing that. And my philosophy is go back to the days of 1994 when we were a very physical and direct team that would go out and beat teams in physical and direct style of play and not play the game that the other teams are playing because they know how to play it better than us. I'd love to know your take on that, and if that's something that we should start talking about as a nation to start beating soccer teams, because I feel like this way we're doing it now where we outpossess teams, 60% of the time we have the ball, but we're losing games 3-0, right? So it just goes to show you that we're in this weird spot where, should we keep going this path or should we go a different one?
Yeah. Okay. So a lot to unpack there, but these are the conversations that we're having right now. This is a good thing because I think it indicates progress. I think it indicates education and understanding, and ultimately, like we were talking about, whether it's with the show or with the game, you want to grow and you want to evolve. And by no means, what I'm about to say, am I suggesting that we regress. But as we evolve and as we move forward, we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And some of the attributes that you are talking about and extolling, I think that in our zest to become better at the game, and oftentimes that's even subjective, possess the ball more. Okay, fine, but that doesn't always equate to being successful. But in our zest to do that, we may have thrown some of the baby out with the bathwater. And I think that there's a whole segment of the fan base out there that laments that fact and kind of longs for some of that. And we've seen glimpses of it over the years. But it doesn't mean that we can't possess the ball. It doesn't mean that we not only want to, but need to get better. But it ultimately has to translate into wins. The problem is, and I think I've talked about this with you before on the show, is that a nation our size and with our diversity that I know we talk about a lot in terms of a lot of our strength and power and greatness, if you will, does come from that, means that we have this diversity of thought. When I was growing up in Michigan, the way that we played soccer was a certain way, and it was reflective of the culture and the geography and the people that were coaching us and the fields and the weather and all these different things went into making that style. But, I went to school out in New Jersey at Rutgers, and I was plopped into a completely different environment that thought and played the game in a different way. And I had to adjust to that situation. So my point is that dictating this is how we're going to play, in doing so becomes exclusionary. And I know that's a dirty word, but it also might be the most direct way to getting results. And so that's the rub right now when it comes to soccer. I think ultimately our country and culture, from a soccer perspective, is going to reflect our country and culture, in that it's going to be diverse. Everybody's going to go different ways. It's not necessarily the best way to win a men's World Cup, but it is the reality and the unique reality of the American society and culture now trying to adapt to this game and trying to incorporate all of these different ways of thinking. If I take 100 Americans that play soccer and ask them what the beautiful game is, I'm going to get 100 different responses. And like I said, it's going to be relative to where they grew up, who they were coached by, for everything from that to, like I said, the weather and the fields and, just the schools that they had and the history that they had and all those different things.
No, that makes total sense. And another thing we've talked about on this show is about, and we've talked about in relation to other nations too, where in the history of the World Cup, there has not been a country-born coach who has won a World Cup, right? Where the country that they were born from, that if they come in from out, again, how I put this in the right way, but where they're not born there, right? Mm-hmm. And they have not won a World Cup. And we have Pochettino, who's our coach now, right? We've had a number of coaches who are not U.S. born, and not that that in itself should be a thing, but it is historically has never happened. And maybe there's number of reasons behind that, but it might be it's more of a cultural thing, right? Culturally, knowing and understanding the game of soccer. But we are a very diverse nation, as you talked about, and talk about our culture. We are not just one culture. We are many cultures in one. And so having a foreign-born coach coaching the U.S. men's national team, is that something that is a hindrance, or is it something that is, going to help them get to where they want to go?
I mean, look, obviously I was involved in 1994 when it was successful, but it was, a very rudimentary type of success, getting out of the group and not embarrassing ourselves on the national stage. And we had a foreign coach, and it worked then. But not for nothing, but the farthest we've ever gone, where a handball potentially a way of going to a semifinal of a World Cup, was under Bruce Arena, as American as a coach as you can get. I do think there is something to be said for having an understanding of what the culture is. And that doesn't preclude someone like Pochettino from getting that. Now, he's got to kind of do it on a fast track type of way because he doesn't have a whole lot of time. But I do think understanding and respecting, maybe even more importantly, the country and the culture and all of the things that you guys talk about on a weekly basis and all of those different things, not that you can necessarily change it, but at least you have to be aware of it. And if you're not, that can be a problem. And some people, that are coming from the outside, they're not aware of it, and maybe they're not made aware of it. And that can absolutely be a problem. But as you guys know, one of my pet peeves is us as Americans in soccer apologizing for what we aren't or what we haven't done. And it's kind of understandable given the fact that soccer in our country traditionally has not been king and is not king right now. And we have kind of had to adapt and adjust to the world and make our own version of it. Well, I think we should lean into that. And I don't think we should apologize for what we haven't done on or off the soccer field. And I think too often we defer, and too often we look to others to tell us how to do it, when there is plenty of incredibly intelligent, deep thinking when it comes to the game that exists right here in our country, whether it's on the field in terms of the talent that's running around, or like I said, whether it's off the field in terms of the coaching, even to the administration of people that are out there. And yet for so long, it's been, well, it's got to be foreign. And look, my dad, is from Greece, and he was a professor at Wayne State University. He came over from Greece and went to school, and then became a professor at Wayne State University. Immediately, when they found out that my father was from Greece, my mom's from Jersey, but my dad's from Greece. And immediately when they found out at a young age, when I was playing for the Birmingham Blazers organization, immediately they found out your dad's Greek, got to be a coach, right? Because anybody with any type of foreign connection obviously knows more about soccer than anybody on the ground. Now, that might have been true in certain places, but it's definitely not true now. And I would even argue and submit to you that there is much more knowledge, even out of necessity, because of the country and the realities of the country that we live in. There's much more knowledge and education when it comes to the existing infrastructure and the people right now than there ever has been.
And the evolution of the game has been interesting to see, and even in the people that we've talked to on this show in particular, have all mentioned that. We had a coach on recently that talked about even the refereeing side in the last 2 decades that he's been here. We first got to the United States, came from the UK. There were certain situations where he understood the game far better than anyone who was refereeing the game, which was problematic in a lot of ways. So not only has education gotten better, training has gotten better, players have gotten more specialized, but to that degree, players are spread out more. They're going and they're playing different places other than the United States. And I think therein lies the issue, is we're not able to really hold on to maybe some of the best talent that we're able to produce here because they want to play overseas. Is that problematic? Because when we look forward to the World Cup, and obviously the impact that having it here in the United States can have, and I'd love to hear your opinion on that, because obviously it hasn't been that way in a long, long time. The last time we did, you were on the team in '94. What kind of an impact can putting together a good performance when you're playing here inside of the United States? What kind of an impact can that have on the game here in the States, since you were a part of the last time it happened?
Yeah. So when you look at the history of soccer, a lot of people kind of turn the clock back to zero in the summer of '94. And it should be said that it's a combination of the summer of '94 and the summer of '99 with the Women's World Cup. Yep. And a lot of people kind of start their soccerdom from there. With respect, there is still an incredible history, if you care to go back and look at it, that existed before that. But for all intents and purposes, the soccer world and our country changed because of that summer in '94, and then a few years later, that summer in 1999, relative to women's soccer. But still, it was still people kicking a ball, and that's all I ultimately care about. Men's, women's, co-ed, naked, doesn't matter. As long as somebody's kicking a ball, I'm cool with it. That same type of impact can happen in 2026, but the world is coming back, and our country is coming into this tent again in a very different landscape, and that's a good thing. That's an incredible opportunity. It's also an incredible responsibility. We cannot afford to screw this up. We have got to harness the power. I'm sitting here talking to you today because of the World Cup in '94. I live the power of that World Cup, and I want to make sure that we harnessed it for all it's worth. We've had plenty of a ramp, so there's no excuse. And if we screw this up, either on or off the field, we have no one to blame but ourselves. I don't think we're going to screw it up. As a matter of fact, I think we're going to see a tournament the likes of which the world has never seen. An event, not even a tournament, an event the likes of which the world has never seen. You mentioned earlier about the aspirational effect and the possible negative effect of players growing up in the U.S. and wanting to play overseas and play in particular in Europe. I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with that, and that's been the case for a long time. However, there's two things. One from a business perspective, and this gets to MLS or USL or any other professional league. You want to be viewed as credible. And two, we are in the United States, and Americans are accustomed to the best. And when they look at a league that, in their minds, is not the best because they are not getting the best players, that's problematic from a business perspective. Here's the good thing. If and when MLS or any competing league wanted to be the best in the world, with the amount of money and with the amount of investment and with the deep pockets in terms of ownership, that could happen. We could see a migration, the likes of which our sport has seen when everybody kind of went to England. But I'll tell you again, they didn't go to England because of the food and the weather. Okay, they went because of the money. The secret sauce and the magic in terms of potential of North America, and in our particular case, the United States, is that people want to come here. They want to live here. Players want to live here, but they don't want to forego their chances when it comes to the national team. They obviously don't want to make less money. So if I could snap my fingers and right now MLS would take off all of the restrictions and owners were allowed to do whatever the hell they want and just let's do it. Moonshot, go big or go home. I would love to see what that ultimate product looked like, and then I would love to see the perception from a lot of the people that you were talking about in terms of the fan base, but also the perception when it comes to the players, and maybe those aspirations now change to I want to be here and I want to play for this team in Cincinnati, or I want to play for this team that I grew up watching, and not only because it's my own country, but because this is the best place in the world to play.
What kind of restrictions are holding MLS owners back?
I mean, just the reality of, a salary cap and the manufactured parity, which, by the way, is one of the reasons they would argue they are still in business here 30 years later. And so you have to I think you have to respect and understand that this has been a slow burn and they've lost a lot of money along the way. And I love to tell other people how to spend their money. And we love to kind of do that with people. And we're very, 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 very good at that. But I do think that, there has been, for the good of the whole, has always been the mantra. And that's all fine and well. But I just wonder what it would look like. And I'm not saying that it's going to happen anytime soon, but
right.
even like a little glimpse, there's an opportunity here, and not to get too much into the weeds, but the FIFA Club World Cup is about to start here in a few weeks, as is the Gold Cup. They're starting on the same day on the 14th. We have the two of the big tournaments, and FIFA just recently said that teams can actually sign players for this FIFA Club World Cup, which means that maybe for a window or for a moment, we could see what Inter Miami, for example, looked like if all the restraints and the constraints were taken off and they could just go out and buy whatever players they want and get the best quality team on the field and therefore produce the best quality product to sell to the people out there, and what that would look like from a competitive standpoint, but also what it would look like from a business standpoint.
Alexi, looking at this upcoming World Cup, and then going back to when you played in '94, with as far as the technologies we have, social media, everything like that, you guys didn't have that.
Yeah,
it was basically restricted to newspapers and what your local news outlets and then SportsCenter at the time would give to you. However, with those limited resources, you guys became larger than life. There's no doubt about it. I mean, there were soccer players who were household names. I mean, John Hart, Eric Winalda, a person that we're very familiar with here, Jurgen Sommer, who was the first coach of the Indy 11, Tony Meola. I mean, even getting into tryout with the Jets, yourself, you had an image, and I know we're a hell of a soccer player, but you had that image as well, and you guys were larger than life. Fast forward to 2026, and I don't think, with the exception of soccer enthusiasts, that 96% of the country could pick any USMNT player out of a police lineup if you had to choose them out. But with all that social media and marketing that they can do, how come that has gone backwards tremendously now than it was back in '94?
Well, I do think that while the platforms and the ease of dissemination of information is at a historic high right now, especially relative to 1994, there was a focus, and therefore the limitation of where you got your news meant that if and when you were in that rarefied air, many more people saw, and this goes back to, even before, when we had like 3 stations on television, and then, you have 57 channels and nothing on, all that kind of stuff. And it just gets diluted. And so, now everybody has a television studio. Everybody has a distribution source. right? Everybody has the technology, and I'm from a music background, and back in the day, we're on 4 tracks and we're bouncing back and forth and stuff like that. And now in the palm of your hand, you can have what back then would have been a multi-million-dollar studio. And so the technology has changed in order to disseminate that information. Back in the day for us, like accomplishing something was you were in USA Today. And for those listeners or viewers that don't know what USA Today is, a newspaper, kids, used to actually you would go to your hotel room and they would put them outside of your hotel room and you'd get them in the airport and stuff like that. It was it was almost like a TV version of a newspaper, but everybody read it. It was always ubiquitous. It was always there. And so that was like a big thing. Or, you were getting on Letterman or Leno, and the list goes on and on of these places that were destination types of views. I do think that as you get closer and closer to the World Cup, there will be more interest, and therefore some of these players will become, more prominent. And I do think that there will be promotions to market them individually and them as a team. But, it was a moment in time. It's interesting. You said last night I was doing an interview because there are documentaries coming out next summer to coincide with 2026 on the 94 team. And a lot of the stuff that that you were just mentioning, we've been talking about, they're trying to get video and they're trying, we didn't have a camera in our hands in our phone. We had the old video cameras and that kind of stuff, but everything wasn't documented. There's a bit of me that wishes it was, because those were some incredible times, and all I have is my memories, and they're fading fast of what it was. But we were also maybe much more in the moment, if you will. And so I don't know if it's good or bad, but it's definitely a very, very different time. And finally, and I know I'm going long here, but I do think that as we get closer to 2026, I hope that there is an excitement that creeps in, but I am concerned right now that there is for lack of a better word, an apathy towards this team. And a lot of it is with the recent failures, but we're almost a year out from the World Cup, and it's going to come real fast. And I want this to be special. I want this to be memorable. I want, in the same way that when I walk down the street and somebody comes up to me and says, man, that summer in 1994, it was awesome. It changed the way that I think of the game. It's changed the way that I think of my country. And I was, 10 years old or 5 years old, whatever. I want many, many years from now, boys and girls that were 5 and 10 years old to just be amazed and wide-eyed at this, and for it to be aspirational, and for it to change not just the way they think about the game, but the way the game is perceived in our country. And it's not going to change overnight. It's not going to become the NFL overnight. But these are incremental types of steps. And we all know a bunch of people come into the tent and then a bunch of people leave. But if we make it welcoming and we make it memorable, more will stay than will leave.
You mentioned music, and I just got one real quick question for you. Just going to step aside for, I know you'll appreciate this reference. I don't think JT or Nate may know this, but better album, Dancing Undercover or Infestation?
Ooh, that is such a good question. So Dancing was done really quick. And for those that don't know, this is a band, Rat, which is my favorite band ever, and should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I will fight you to the death. So Dancing was their third album. I'm not counting the EP, but their third major album. And it was done very, very quickly. I love the production. There is a lot of filler. Infestation is really, really interesting because it came about, decades later, and it was like this drop from Rat heaven, if you will, in that there was throwback, but it was still progressive enough, and I really, really liked it. But I'm still gonna go with Dancing. There was a period there in the mid '80s when they were just cranking out albums, and I still love Dancing. I mean, that first hit for Dance, which is the first single and the first song off the album, when that thing hits, man, oh man, I'm out of my seat.
Fantastic.
Being
that
born
was
in
definitely-
'96, Natalie, that one just went straight,
that's-
straight over my head. Sorry,
I
I
knew
don't
it was gonna
remember the
happen.
summer of
Yeah,
'94. I'll be the first to
know.
admit, but
That's
you know,
okay.
ready for my first.
Hey, listen,
experience
you're
in
never too
26.
young or old to rat and roll, my friends. Okay.
There you
boy.
go.
Let's go.
There you go.
So we're gonna transition this conversation to U.S. Open Cup, and
okay.
you know we've been talking quite a bit about this, and you know I love to hear your thoughts. Do you, from your perspective, the first question I'm going to ask you is: do you believe the U.S. Open Cup is like a forgotten thing in this country right now? Like it's just kind of like whatever.
In the same way that I was talking earlier about, I'd like to see what MLS would look without the constraints. I would love to see what the U.S. Open Cup could be if it was given, you know, the attention. And when I say attention, I guess it's a euphemism for the money and the organization and what it could ultimately be. However, it's been really interesting and a really interesting kind of case study to see the reaction to the U.S. Open Cup and to see a whole segment that kind of look at it as mandatory in terms of the altruism and the charitable aspect of it when it comes to, in particular, Major League Soccer and their approach to it. I don't know what responsibility MLS, in this case, has to the Open Cup, but I do know that you need to make it attractive, because if you don't, then MLS teams, which is certainly what MLS in general and MLS teams have done, will look at it as a suck in terms of the time that it takes, the revenue that is lost, and the lack of competition. And so while it's a nice to have for a lot of these MLS teams, it's not a need to have unless they're going to do it just because they feel they have some sort of responsibility to the American soccer landscape out there. And while that can be nice and romantic, I think there has to be something more.
Almost seems like a resentment in some sort, right? I mean, almost on some level, right? Because it's
Yeah.
like we went out there now. It's like a resentment. It's like I don't. There's no compelling factors why these teams should be there in the first place, right? I mean, $1 million, pooled money is not prize money is not anything. I think the takeaway is $600,000 to the winner this year. I mean, so in the scheme of things, that's nothing for these teams. It's a very small portion. I didn't even realize that the MLS Cup, just until recently, that money was only $300,000 to the team that won, and that in itself seems like nuts to me. I don't know why that money is not so much higher. You're talking about winning the biggest championship in Major League Soccer, and your team is splitting $300,000 amongst its players. It just seems weird.
It's also weird from a business perspective because MLS spends so much time talking about playoffs and defending playoffs relative to the Supporters Shield that you think you would want to do everything you possibly could to throw all of your eggs into the MLS Cup basket. And still to this day, people don't ever ask you, how many Supporters Shields did you win? They ask you, did you win an MLS Cup? And that's what you get that ring for. And, show me a team or a player that is, talking about how proud he or she is of winning the Supporters Shield, and I'll show you somebody that never won the MLS Cup. And that's kind of how it works. But yeah, I mean, look, we were talking earlier about the FIFA Club World Cup that's about to start here in a few weeks. How did they make that more relevant, or how are they trying to make that more relevant? They're putting a boatload of money on it, and that's what FIFA's doing. And so it's not as simple as that, but there is a simple type of equation to at least making it worth your while from a financial perspective. And then maybe you can get around to establishing from a more romantic perspective as to why you want to play in it. I played in it. I won it with the Galaxy years ago. There was a sense of pride because of the unique aspect of it. But just being this unique and quirky type of tournament, that's not enough, especially as MLS maybe moves on and starts to distance itself. But I will say that there has been a kind of elitist snobbery when it comes to Major League Soccer, which isn't always a good look, and especially for a league that is trying to, and let's be honest, needs more fans. MLS's problem isn't that there aren't soccer fans in the U.S. It's that there's not enough MLS fans. And they kind of need to endear themselves as much as possible to the general soccer fan out there and convert them into MLS fans.
So do you think that, and I think this is a great point. Do you think that players within the MLS, players at the highest levels in this country might think this tournament might be beneath them on some level?
Yeah, I think I absolutely think that there are players that are like, we gotta, play this game and this game, and why are we doing that? And I can't speak for all of them. I think that oftentimes, if you travel, if you have to go on the road, and I think it's reflected oftentimes in the starting lineups. Although, as we sit here right now in the quarterfinals, all MLS teams, even in the round of 16, there was only one non-MLS team, right, in Pittsburgh. So the dominance when it comes to the actual competition relative to the other teams is on display, and that's kind of makes their argument. I guess it doesn't, but maybe it makes their argument that why are we even doing this if we are so much farther advanced in terms of the quality that we have. And I'm old enough to remember back in 1990, whatever it was, 7, when Rochester won the Open Cup. It was the last time a non-MLS team won the Open Cup. And that's not necessarily strange. For the most part, that happens in other countries. But the process of possibly having a Cinderella, I know that's very romantic to people. And I don't want to, downplay that or disrespect that. But you can see it from an MLS perspective, whether it's a player or a coach or an administrator, with some of the challenges that you're faced from having to do this. And the only reward is, well, you're doing it for the good of the game. Okay, there's a part of you that responds to that, but there's also a part that says we have other ways to help the game.
The other side of it is too, and I think it's interesting you mentioned part of it, and it's a conclusion that we've come to on previous episodes. It really is the marketing side. You have to make it important for people to care, right? Like, you can't just have a game and expect people to show up. People are going to show up regardless. But part of the biggest reason, and you talked about the elitist snobbery maybe a little bit in the MLS, and maybe that's part of the reason, and it plays into why people don't really buy into it, why they don't show up to it nearly as much in numbers. There's this mentality, and I've talked about it with you, JT, many times off the air. There's almost kind of like this shit or get off the pot mentality, especially when you talk about the MLS. Why it seems like they're half in, half out when it comes to this tournament. And that's problematic to me too, because you sprinkle them in as the tournament goes, and all of a sudden now it's just MLS teams. And not only that, they're not playing their best. They're maybe not playing their best available options because they realize they don't really need to in order to beat these other teams that are involved in it. And at the end of the line, again, when it comes to the money and the prize money and everything like that, we talked about it. The owners here at these MLS teams they're not struggling. They don't necessarily need the money, but maybe for a USL side that's really fighting their way through, they could definitely use that chunk of cash at the end if they were to win it all. How would you go about restructuring this? Do you think they have to restructure it? Is that the issue?
Yeah, I mean, look, again, it's easy to tell people how to spend money, or whether it's theirs or somebody else's, and there has to be more promotion, there has to be more marketing, there has to be more prize money to make it worth your while. I mean, the USL component of not just Open Cup, but of soccer in America is really interesting. I don't know where it is going to go. The whole sanctioning talk, Division I sanctioning and the league standards. When you read the league standards from the United States Soccer Federation, and for those that may or may not know, there's a lot of soccer people obviously listening, but these are the standards that you have to live up to in order to qualify for a Division I league, Division II league, Division III, and that there's nothing that says you can't have multiple Division Is, Division IIs. As a matter of fact, we have had that. We even curling had that when it comes to the women's game. The other thing that when you read the standards is that there's nothing relative to the level of competition. All right. So the standards have nothing to do with how good the players are or how good the teams are. And when it comes to something like USL, if USL had the capability and had, this group conglomerate of incredibly deep-pocketed billionaires out there and wanted to make the league as good or better from a competitive standpoint relative to Major League Soccer, they have the mechanisms to do that. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but from a romantic standpoint, I would love to have seen or see a USL team or even below a USL team come up, be that Cinderella, and not only win it, but in doing so, taking a place away from MLS when it comes to the international tournaments. So maybe it's just, making more, awarding more when it comes to that tournament. And if there are more consequences from winning or losing in a tournament, then the more important it becomes to those participating in it.
Do you think the USL will ever put pressure on the MLS in terms of raising to their level of play?
I don't think with the current structure and the current ownership that they have, but if when this restructuring happens and they kind of consolidate into, I can't remember what they're going to call the Division I version of it, if it's populated with really ambitious owners, yeah, I'd love to see the fight. I don't know if it would work, but I would love to see the fight. And again, it's not my money. But right. I think USL has a lot of challenges when it comes to establishing it itself as a legitimate and credible alternative to Major League Soccer. But I will say this, as successful as Major League Soccer has been, 30 teams, 30th year, there has never been a more successful professional soccer league in North America in history. It doesn't mean that they can't be taken down. It doesn't mean that if something came along and somebody did build a better mousetrap, that the American public might not gravitate toward it. It would take a lot of money, and it would take a lot of balls, let's be honest.
Yeah.
But it would be fun to see. I mean, the American soccer wars, ultimately, while I talk about, we eat our own, I also am a firm believer in competition. And I think it would force MLS to be better. And if they were able to usurp MLS as the league, that would be something to see. I don't know if I'm going to be around for it when it comes to it, but these American soccer wars will continue. And while we sometimes lament the fact that these are happening, sometimes it's exactly what we need in order to light a fire, kick us in the ass, and drive that competition that ultimately in any business makes people innovative and makes people do things differently and makes people dream and do things better.
Alexi, I want to go back to what you said, and this is more of a you question, finding out about your career and your thoughts, but how everybody said when your dad and obviously your name, clearly he can just play and he can coach.
Yeah.
With my last name, people just automatically think I can cook. That's just the way it is. But I go way back to when my fandom started, and it actually started overseas. It was Serie A, Juventus. I fell into it and have just loved the international games since. But I want to get into your head as a young 24, 25-year-old, becoming the first American player to go over and play in Serie A for Padova. Can you create that moment for what it meant to you at that time, knowing that that's one of the biggest, if not the largest soccer platform in the world, and you getting a chance to go over from what you experience here in the States to go over there where soccer's a religion and to step on that pitch for the first time and just kind of look around for the first time and go, holy S, what the heck is going on here? Can you relive a little bit of that for us?
Yeah. So, I mentioned the power of the World Cup. I'll take you back 4 years from 94 to 1990. And the 1990 World Cup was actually in Italy. The U.S. qualified for the first time in decades. We sent a very young, inexperienced team, and we ultimately got our ass kicked. It didn't get out of the group. However, in the stands during that World Cup was me and a bunch of my high school buddies traipsing around Europe, drinking a lot of beer and chasing girls and using the World Cup as an excuse to do it, not knowing that 4 years later I would be on the field. And so 4 years later, this happens. My life fundamentally changes. The opportunities on and off the field. I run around and the team does well, and there's all of this attention, and billions of people are watching you, and I'm doing shots with Metallica and going on Letterman and doing all these different things and these wonderful, wonderful opportunities. But from a professional standpoint, it gave me a job, and it gave me a job in Italy. And sometimes people forget, I know you guys are young, but back in the 80s and the early 90s, Italian soccer and Italy, that was the place to be. It was before the Bosman ruling. It was before the European community really opened up, and we had this mass migration, especially to the EPL in England. Everybody was going there. It was the best competition. It was the best money. And while I got opportunities in England, in Germany, and in Italy following the World Cup, there was only one place that I was going. I wanted to experience that. What a lot of people also don't know is when guys like myself and Kobe Jones stepped on the field in the summer of 1994, we had never been on the books of a club team. So all of our experience was international. And it was a backwards ass way of appearing in a World Cup. But that was just the reality of on the ground living as an American soccer player at the time. So I show up in Padova, which is a city in the north of Italy, right outside of Venice. They had just come up from Serie B into Serie A. Their only goal was just to stay in Serie A. And, here's this American. Back then, you could only have 3 foreigners play on your team. So we had a Croatian, a Dutchman, and myself, an American. We were the 3 players. And it was such an incredible experience. Yes, the 90 minutes playing against the best players in the world, getting my ass kicked a lot by those best players in the world. That was great. Living in the fishbowl, like you mentioned, that is soccer in Italy, was just a life-changing type of experience where from the moment that you leave your house to the moment that you go back to your house at night, everybody knows who you are and everybody cares about what you're doing in terms of kicking a ball. That was, again, a big, big change. I became a better soccer player. I became a better person for having to adjust to a completely different life, obviously new culture, new language, all of those different things, and then living day to day. And then, playing against some of the best teams and the best players in the world. It was everything that I wanted from an experience. Having said all of that, one of the proudest days of my life was getting on the plane in Venice and flying back to the United States in 1996 to be part of the start of Major League Soccer. You in life, you get very few opportunities, if any, to be part of something from the start that is going to hopefully outlive you. And, that process of coming back to the proverbial league of our own, that was awesome. So wonderful time in Italy. I'll never forget it. And it changed me forever. But that time was done. And I got on that plane having done what I needed to do and coming back to start and help start the league with a number of other people and men and women on and off the field that were working for this league that we had talked about in bars and in the back of buses and in restaurants about, hey, wouldn't it be great to be able to make money and to be able to play soccer in our own country in a league of our own?
That's pure awesome. We have some comments that came in here during the show. I want to share them and have a chance for you to respond to those who are watching this show. One of this coming from our friends here at the coffee firm. They actually, a local team here in Lansing called Lansing Common. And they've got a great community organization. They've actually partnered with this company out of it's like a coffee company. It's called the it's hard to see it now, but this company here is called Early Bird is the brand for their Lansing Common Robins. And I can't read this. It's terrible that my eyes have gotten that bad. I think it's called Strange Matter Coffee. Anyways, out of Lansing. Anyways, but they are a huge fan and friend of the network and what we do. And they had this comment coming in this morning. Can you comment on playing in Switzerland at the Silverdome in '94? I was there about 12 beers in, but still remember that game. So, but to be fair, the Silverdome was known for lots of drinking. I feel like that's one of the places in sports that like, you were going to get drunk there.
Oh my God, I love this question. Actually, I was talking about this last night in the documentary. We were talking about the Silverdome game. So, And for those that are watching that don't know, the Pontiac Silverdome was one of the venues in the 1994 World Cup. As a matter of fact, it was the first indoor venue in the history of World Cups. Now, for those of you like the coffee firm that have been to the Pontiac Silverdome, and by the way, rest in peace, Pontiac Silverdome, you will know that while it was indoor, it was not necessarily climate controlled, especially when you go up to Michigan State and you get our finest up there at Michigan State to come up with a tier system of grass that you then install in the Silverdome. And the effect that it creates is this hothouse type of thing, in that the humidity has nowhere to go. So one of the hottest games I've ever played, but also one of the most memorable. And this incredible full circle moment of, growing up and going to the Silverdome and watching the Lions, obviously, watching the Pistons when they played there, watching the Detroit Express play there, obviously concerts, and this iconic place from my childhood. And then coming back full circle and 15 minutes away from where I grew up in Birmingham to be playing in the Silverdome, and meeting Barry Sanders after the game, and Henry Kissinger coming through the locker room, who was huge in terms of bringing the World Cup. All of these different memories, they all flow back. But ultimately, walking out there on that field at the Silverdome in my first World Cup, and in the first game of my World Cup, and knowing that up there, all of those, friends and family, people that I knew, people that I didn't know, and the pride that I felt, and I know the pride that they felt of, not just being there in a World Cup, but one of their own actually walking on the field. That was pretty cool. And in a summer of very, very cool moments, that absolutely ranks up there. It was awesome. And Eric Winalda scored a goal. We got a point against Switzerland. We were off to the races, and it's a game that I'll never forget. It's a moment that I'll never forget. And it's a location that we'll never forget. By the way, in terms of the connections of 94 and 26, coming up this next summer in the World Cup, there will now be 4.5 indoor venues when it comes to the 16 different locations that are being played between Mexico, Canada, and the United States. So Dallas, Houston, Atlanta, Vancouver, and then I'm going to include SoFi here in Los Angeles, but it's kind of indoor-outdoor. But a bunch of indoor places that are climate controlled. So it's going to be actually pristine conditions when they put that grass in there, for the fans and obviously for the players there. So as the saying goes, you've come a long way, baby.
This is a question from Michael Lathrop. Alexi, is USSF the root of our nation's beautiful game chaos? And is it time for them to flex its strength to streamline and usher in a cohesive, improved soccer pyramid?
Yeah, so it's easy to vilify the United States Soccer Federation, but if you were to put yourself in that position, and some of the things that we've talked about earlier in terms of, the diversity, and when we say diversity, what we're really talking about is a diversity of thought in the way that people think about the game. And if you were put in charge of a country our size with this incredible diversity of thought relative to the game, how are you going to organize that? Because if and when you make a decision, inevitably there is going to be a portion of people that think you're batshit crazy, and completely disagree with you. And that's just the reality. So I often at least take a breath before criticizing the Federation, although there's plenty of actions that they've taken over the years that are worthy of criticism, maybe even to you condemnation. And that's fine. They also understand the gig that they are in and the challenges and the criticism that they are going to come in for. That's a long way of saying, Michael, I think the USSF absolutely has a power and a role to play in terms of the direction of the game. And certainly in the past, I'll be the first to say that they could have done things differently, and maybe our landscape would look differently. But I also think, sometimes we, and this is not just about the United States Soccer Federation, but sometimes we kick ourselves for what we aren't and what we haven't done as a soccer playing nation. Every once in a while, it's worth patting ourselves on the back with how far we have actually come. You don't rest on your laurels, I get that, but it's pretty amazing what a country our size, with that diversity that we talked about, also with the history, or I guess the lack of history when it comes to the game, how far we have come in a relatively short period of time. It's actually unprecedented when you put it up against any other country and culture out there. And I think a lot of that comes from the men and women that work, many in the federation, and many outside of the federation. And, this vilifying, whether it's of the United States Soccer Federation folks or even, one thing that's pissed me off of late is the vilification of people that work in youth development as if it should be this charitable type of work, and their benevolence should be on display, and it's not a capitalistic type of endeavor out there. But there's incredible men and women that each and every day work to make soccer better in the United States, and most of them don't ever get the credit that they deserve, but at the very least we shouldn't vilify them.
I couldn't agree with you more. This last question here before we run out of time is, do you think that the MLS has to worry about the USL?
I think it's like a younger brother in that they know what buttons to push, and they are a pest, but ultimately they don't really factor in and matter right now. I'm not saying that they couldn't. And, with the, I guess the announcement of the, potential intra-league promotion relegation situation, I think that's really going to be interesting. I think the response that MLS has had to the change of season, I think is in some way related to USL being in the ecosystem. So I think it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing for soccer. I think it's a good thing for MLS. I want MLS at the very least looking over their shoulder and people knocking like a young brother or tagging along, because if they are just unfettered and do whatever they want, they're not going to feel any pressure, and they're not going to feel any pressure to change and to get better. And I think at the very least USL does that. I think USL has a real interesting opportunity, to do something different and to provide an alternative for people. But you can't half-ass it. You really have to go big or go home. And the ma and pa type of setup that USL still is in many ways, or at the very least has the perception of being, that's a hindrance. And that's a problem if they really, really want to compete with Major League Soccer going forward.
Alexi, we appreciate you stopping on by here this morning. We know how early it is in California and what you obviously do in regards to your show and how you help obviously elevate the game of soccer in this country. It's been a pleasure to have you on once again. Again, Michael commenting there, thank you. This is where the interesting thing comes for us. We play this outro music and it starts to, is it going to
did it. Happened again.
But either way, Alexi, we appreciate you stopping on by. Is it still doing it?
No, you're clear now.
I was just giving us a rock on. Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, hey, we appreciate you stopping on by, Alexi, and being a part of the show. That'll be a wrap here on number 93. We're 7 episodes away from 100. We couldn't be more excited about that. Back tomorrow morning, Thursday, same time, same place, right here on Inside Again.